All right, hello and welcome back to the Dragon Plus live stream. Returning to us at long last.
I'm still alive, everyone. I'm still alive.
Jeremy Crawford, lead rules designer of Dungeons & Dragons, lead designer of the Player's Handbook, and the game's managing editor. Welcome back.
Thank you.
I can only assume your absence has been because you've just been slacking off.
That's right. You know me. I've just been reclining in a comfy chair with a book in one hand and a drink in the other.
It's the only way it could be. No, you. I was looking back. We haven't had you on since August 14th because you might have been a bit busy with both Dungeon of the Mad Mage and Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah. We got a little ambitious this summer and decided to wrap up 2 books at the same time. And since all of our books are my babies, it meant I had 2 babies to cradle at the same time before sending them out into the world. So first we sent off Dungeon of the Mad Mage,
yes.
and then Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. And so those books are both now at the printer, coming, now hurtling toward everybody later this year.
Yes, so again, just kind of loop it back to Dragon Plus, free magazine app on iOS, Android, and dragonmag.com. We've got another issue coming out next week. It is wrapping up now content-wise. So we're going to take a little dive into Dungeon of the Mad Mage. And also on Spoilers and Swag, I believe Nathan is going to have some previews to showcase for those as well. So yeah, we're getting ready. We're excited. I've seen the inside of the book, and I'm excited by both of them. So
I am too. I mean, it's one of
good things.
It's one of those things that my hands and my mind are deep in each book, and then I'll breathe a bit when they're done, and I then get to look at them, and then being a D&D fan kicks in, and I'm like, oh, what a new I have a new D&D book, even though I might have spent a year making that thing.
No, it's a desk drop. Every time there's a desk drop, like here's your copy. It's like, little Christmas parceled out every so often throughout the year.
It never gets old.
So before we get into the content for this week, and I'm nervous and terrified every time I go on a live stream, especially so this one because of the content we'll be talking about later on. But,
because I am going to tear into something you wrote.
That's right. I want it to be torn into.
You are a brave man. I commend you for it.
But before we do, it's been a while. Yes. We've got a piece of content that we're going to be talking through later this episode. If you also have questions for Jeremy, because it has been a while, please do put them in chat. Please do preface them with a question. And Lauren Obo Crazy, if you could please collect them as we go. I see the whispers already coming in, so Thank you so much. Yes, really quickly, not just for Lauren, but for everyone's consideration, we are cycling through some of our emotes for Twitch. These days, we've been sitting on the last round for probably a little too long, so we've cycled some new ones in. We'll continue to cycle some additional ones in, so we now have the Pelham emote that we can include.
Oh my gosh, look at that Pelham emote.
He's angry Pelham. And the Flump emote, that's what's been coming through as well.
Do we have a fill up the hallway emote?
No, we don't have. We have to make one of those now.
Yes.
So we'll make a fill up the hallway for the next round.
I can't believe I just brought that up. I can't help myself.
It's a live stream of puns aplenty.
Yeah.
So aside from working diligently on those 2 books, anything reading, watching, playing of note for yourself lately beyond the confines of everything mechanical?
So I took the last 5 days off, and let's see, reading. I am reading this gorgeous book on Orpheus. That's the name of the book. Orpheus, the Song of Life. It is a gorgeous exploration of the figure of Orpheus in myth throughout history, and just how influential Orpheus has been on art, and not just on Greco-Roman religion, but in other religions. It's just a fabulous book. I recommend it.
God, demigod of sleep, dreams?
Oh, so you're thinking of Morpheus.
I'm thinking of Morpheus.
Yes, aka the Sandman. So Orpheus is the famous musician whose music is said to be so powerful that he could not only charm people, but like very trees and stones around him.
Okay.
He is also well known for when his wife, sorry, spoilers for several thousand-year-old story, but for anyone who doesn't know, his wife dies, and he famously descends into the underworld and tries to lead her out of the realm of death back into the realm of the living. It does not turn out so well. And then later, partly because, according to at least Ovid's version of the story of Orpheus, Orpheus's romantic inclinations change completely, and he ends up loving only men and actually swears off the love of women. And so then this group of women, the Bacchae, they tear him limb from limb, and that is the end of Orpheus.
Oh.
But Orpheus doesn't truly end because he's very much like the god Dionysius, who was also torn apart, but who then comes back together. And this, it's interesting, divine beings or semi-divine beings being torn apart and then put back together is a recurring theme in a lot of world myths.
Oh, sure. And Egypt has
Osiris.
Osiris,
yes. Yeah. And it's something we over the years have played around with in D&D. D&D has often had, the dead god who comes back. It's a powerful thing in our world's myths, so it makes sense that theme would then echo into our storytelling in D&D as well. As far as what I've been playing, in my little bit of time off, I've been poking at the new Spider-Man game on the PS4.
Yes.
It's an action game, which usually means I'm terrible at it, and indeed I am terrible at it, but I'm really enjoying it. And let's see, I finally had a chance to play the board game Rise of Moloch by Cool Mini or Not. I've had the board game for many months, but I've been too busy to play it, so I finally got to try it out. And that's a fun sort of steampunk, gothic horror type game, perfect for Halloween month. Now we're in Halloween month.
I was going to say yes. Also, this issue, I have to do my marketing side. I have to spit it back to marketing. This issue coming up, we're going to look at Axis and Allies and Zombies, appropriate for Halloween, and Betrayal Legacy as well. So 2 more board games in the coming issue, and then for the December issue, we'll look at Dungeon Mayhem, which is
it's so fun.
It is a lot of fun.
Yeah, last week I started playing some rounds of Dungeon Mayhem. And for those of you listening who don't know about our new card game, Dungeon Mayhem, it is so fun and also crazy, crazy fast. So if you're like me and you play a bunch of other games, board games, video games, and whatnot with your friends, Dungeon Mayhem is, for you board gamers out there, you'll know what I mean by this, and this is not a diss, this is actually a loving statement. Dungeon Mayhem is a perfect filler game, meaning it is great to fill the gaps of time, sometimes between those other longer games you're playing with your friends.
Sure.
And the longer game can include a session of D&D, like while you're waiting for everyone to show up, you could get in several rounds of Dungeon Mayhem. Hell, during your break in a D&D game, you could get several rounds of Dungeon Mayhem in, while people are getting, refreshes on their drinks and their snacks and whatnot.
I could see it as sort of an alternate combat mechanic.
Yes.
Like, hey, I'll play. How about we roll the die, or I'll take you on Dungeon Mayhem.
No, I would love and most likely will incorporate Dungeon Mayhem into a D&D session at some point, especially if I have a PvP element, because it is such a fun way to have player characters have a showdown, and it's just filled with chaos and big fun.
All right. Well, at least you've had carved out some personal time, which is always recommended. But you are not done yet, although we have 2 books out at the printers now. Now you're going to be going into a round of travel. So at the end of October, we've got TwitchCon coming up, and you will be there?
I will be there.
All right.
I will be DMing a game that I believe we'll even appear right here on Twitch.
Yes, we will be live streaming multiple pieces of content from TwitchCon, some games, some panels as well, including that one. And then in November, early November, GameholeCon takes place in Madison, Wisconsin.
Yep.
And what will you be doing there?
Let's see, I'll be on a few panels. I'm going to be playing in one of our Extra Life games, and I'm going to be DMing a bunch. I have a custom adventure called Ashes of the Vampire that I will be running for a few groups at GameholeCon. I'm really looking forward to it. I actually really enjoy when I'm at a convention and I get to do long form sessions, you know, like 4-hour plus sessions, because then to me it feels like a home game.
Yes.
You can really dig in with the group. I have run this particular adventure a couple of other times, and I love seeing how wildly differently it plays out depending on the group. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the players at Gamehole do with that adventure.
All right, so, and we will also be live streaming that, I believe. So
I don't think my game,
one of the games you're
but the
in,
extra, yeah, the extra
life game, we will be live streaming that. So again, yeah, shout out to Alex Kammer setting up GameholeCon. Madison, Wisconsin is a great town, but it's because I went to school there. But again, for Extra Life, it's for a great cause, obviously for the Children's Miracle Network of Hospitals. You guys are awesome, by the way. We've got the D&D Extra Life page set up. It's already at over 85,000 in donations and contributions. So thank you so much for everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Who's able to contribute, has contributed. If you're thinking about contributing, obviously there's still time to do so. Which is kind of what we were going to be talking about a bit today. Really quickly, if you do like some of the new emotes, those are the fine work of Emi Tanji, our designer. She will be creating the Extra Life t-shirt design that we'll be putting up shortly on Custom Ink. Last year we had the Tomb of Annihilation Extra Life design. This year we went a little bit water deep for our campaign storyline. And then also sort of an evergreen D20 for Extra Life as well. So a few more options this year, but those will be available soon. Last year, we also had several pieces of content drop onto the DM's Guild. You were one of the instigators, weren't you, for the Turtle package?
Oh, yes, I was.
Did we ever talk about that story, about how that, even the genesis of the Turtle package came about?
It is funny that the Turtle became a playable race largely because Mike Merles insisted on Twitter that no one would want to play Turtles, because we had been jokingly arguing about this in the office.
Yes.
About Turtles. I love Turtles. I love Turtles. Going back, years back in D&D. Plus, I have found over the years people just love animal races and anthropomorphic animal races.
Yeah.
So Mike put up a survey on Twitter where it says, would you want Turtle as a playable race? And every option that he gave was some version of no.
No, never, of course not.
So then I posted a competing survey where every survey option was some form of yes. And my survey beat his survey by 2-1. I mean, his survey was just annihilated. And so the outcome of that was then Chris Perkins, being my buddy in this impish love for Turtles, proposed putting together the Turtle package and making them a playable race. So I told him, hey, if you do the initial writing, I'll develop it. And it became a reality.
And yes, so we had a couple of items, a few items last year hit the DM's Guild. The Turtle package. We also had Chris Lindsay's One Growing Above, his adventure and material, and Sean Wood's Lost Kenku adventure. And Chris Tulloch had X Marks the Spot, sort of the Ixalan Magic D&D crossover. For this year, I don't believe we're doing a playable race. Everyone was heads down on the material being put together. But one of the things that Wizards allowed for this year was employees are able to contribute material to the DM's Guild, provided that the proceeds benefit Extra Life. So I believe you can look for a couple of Wizards employee-created adventures that will be hitting this year, including one that I've been working with some of the Guild Adepts that we're going to tear into one of the components for right now. So to give you a little background, I sent you the adventure in advance.
Yep.
And so first of all, this was, folks saw a couple weeks ago, we put up a poll question for rumors about the Barrier Peaks. So it's kind of a personal fan favorite of mine to go back to the Barrier Peaks. I didn't want to recreate the original adventure that's been done. It's a great adventure. I love chocolate and peanut butter mushed together in sci-fi fantasy ways. So,
and for anyone who doesn't know anything about the original expedition to Barrier Peaks, it's this classic old adventure where the party they go into the Barrier Peaks and they discover that the so-called dungeon that they're going to is actually this spaceship that has crashed into these mountains in the world of Greyhawk.
And it just makes it's a great dungeon, a fish out of water dungeon experience where, and there's some suspension of disbelief from the players and the characters. The players might know what's up, but it's still great fun to play it out as a character.
Yeah.
So.
And it was an early example of how D&D is so flexible that it can handle all sorts of genre mashups. D&D's history is filled with not only classic high fantasy, but bits of science fiction being thrown in, steampunk being thrown in, gothic horror being thrown in.
I was going to say classic horror,
comedy being thrown in. So I mean, D&D can just like absorb it all. And this adventure was one of the earliest examples of demonstrating that.
So, so for this one, we didn't want to recreate Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, but we kind of wanted to play with that setting a little bit and sort of the themes of that as well. So, in this one, players are searching for a lost laboratory. There is a mad scientist that disappeared in the peaks eons ago. As it turns out, he might have come across said crashed ship or something similar to it, and has been studying its technology for his own research. Now, one of the bits of technology from the original, and part of the fun of the adventure was, hey, wouldn't it be a great lark if your D&D characters could have laser weapons once or things of that nature? They're going to not fight golems, they'll fight actual robots. And then, of course, there's the famous suit of powered armor.
Yes.
So while we didn't want to recreate the adventure, there were a couple of elements that I felt would be remiss if we didn't include in some capacity, however much updated. So the powered armor we put in as an option at the end as a new magic item. But before this goes out to the public, I really would appreciate a development or design plus check on what we have going so far, and let's get it right. Let's get it better, shall we say.
So that's right. Today, you're not only going to get to take a look at this new version of the powered armor. I almost said the powdered armor. The powered armor from the Barrier Peaks, but we are going to develop it live.
So we've got the in one hand we've got the original, and we could put up the original stats really quickly, and some of it is definitely what the current version was aiming to hit upon. So it may have been broken originally.
And what I love about the original art, which is currently on the screen, is this the funny implication that I guess D&D characters were meant to be running around in this spaceship in furry loincloths.
But of course.
Because if you go back and look at a lot of old first edition art, it is amazing the number of D&D characters who were running around in nothing much more than what He-Man would be running around in.
I was going to say covers of Conan paperback books or He-Man definitely had some influence on perhaps the character portrayal in that.
Yeah.
So this is the stats for the original. The original powered armor, it bumped you down to armor class 0 back in the day of Thaco. It gave you a force shield, which sort of had its own hit point count. And then bumped up your strength to 1800, no small feat in itself. Anti-gravity, and came with a whole kind of host of options that you had at your disposal. possibly unbalancing in a campaign.
Maybe.
So what we looked to do in the kind of an updated take on it was to find ways to perhaps offer the goods but mitigate the unbalancing effects of that. And in the adventure, sort of the mad scientist that you're after, he's been studying this technology. Now, some of this technology uses fuel cells, energy cells to power, or find ways to use the user's own sort of energy to power it as an alternative source of power. So if we put up the current version, the first page of the stats.
All right, here's the new one. And everyone, Bart has already agreed that I can go to town on this.
This is starting points.
Right. That's right. Yep. All right. So, anytime I'm developing something new, one of my first things, and a number of you watching have heard me talk about this before, is for me to make sure I understand the story. So what I did was I not only read through this magic item, but I also went earlier into the adventure where it shows up to make sure I understood the story context for this, because magic items that appear in adventures are almost always a part of that story in some way. This is unlike the magic items in the Dungeon Master's Guide, where they're really sort of all-purpose. They're meant to work in almost any campaign, in many different worlds, whereas magic items that are made for a particular adventure, they have a targeted purpose. So I wanted to make sure I understood that purpose, because the last thing I want to do when I'm developing any bit of rules for the game is inadvertently blow it up, and then suddenly it no longer serves the story purpose it was designed for. You know, I didn't want to be the one pulling the thread out of the sweater, and then it causes the whole thing to unravel, and we don't have an adventure anymore.
Sure.
So
now that said, I'll give you the caveat. This appears sort of at the end.
Yes.
So unraveling the sweater, if that's what happens, that's what happens.
Yeah. And so doing that homework, I discovered we actually have a lot of leeway because the adventure does not rely on any of the specifics of this item.
No, it is the chocolate after the meal.
Yeah. And I would have to say that already for me was a good, like I gave points to the adventure for that. Because for any of you designing magic items for an adventure, while it should be tied to the story in some way, beware of your adventure text getting lost in the weeds of that magic item's particular properties. Make sure, as much as possible, you leave the properties in the magic items text and don't litter your adventure text with all sorts of very specific references to those properties. First off, part of that is just for reference sake. You want the DM or the players to be able to just go to one place, read it, and not worry that there's a bunch of text somewhere else that further clarifies how the thing works. You also don't want to be in the terrible situation of, let's say you decide to change the magic item later, but you had all these really specific references to how it works somewhere else.
Right.
And then you forget to change all those, and then suddenly you have one piece of text not agreeing with the other. All right, so with that out of the way, let's dive in. Right away we see, here's the magic item's name, we see its type, we see that this is a piece of magic armor, specifically a piece of magic plate armor. The rarity that's been given to it is legendary, and it requires attunement. So we're gonna just sort of put a pin in this line for now, and we'll come back to it later. Because whenever I'm developing a magic item, whether it's a magic item that someone else designed or that I designed, one of the last things you do is nail down the rarity, because you don't know if your rarity is right or not until you have stabilized what it is the magic item does. But it is good for me to know as I go in that the intent is for this to be legendary. And so as I'm evaluating what this magic item does, I'm going to have in my mind, we're shooting for legendary. Whereas up here, if it said common, like that would tell me the writer wanted this to be a common item, I would look at this long list of things this armor could do, and I'd say, woo, we really need to do some work here. And either I would have come right to you and said, hey, is it a mistake that it says common up here? But looking at the item, just scanning through it, legendary seems like a good starting target.
Would you ever go with unique, which is sort of off the chart? There's a one-off. You don't want to, or do you prefer, hey, no, these are the rarity levels, and we have this table for a reason?
So you do need to use the rarities that the game provides. If there's only one of these things in existence, that's an artifact. So even there we have you covered in our rarity system.
Sure.
The artifact category is for those things where they basically break all the rules, and they are so story specific that you don't want them locked too much into our regular rarity progression.
Okay.
All right. So the first paragraph, and I think Pelham will pop it up there on the screen. Thank you, Pelham. The first paragraph focuses on what does this item look like. Now, letting you in a view behind the curtain, we often will be very concise when it comes to physical descriptions of magic items in our books if there's art of the magic item. We let the art carry as much of that weight as possible because we know, first off, of course, there's the cliche of a picture is worth 1,000 words, but we also know that often when people are using these items at the table, they want to dive into what the heck does this thing do as quickly as possible. So I'm not going to go through these first few sentences with a fine-tooth comb, but the editorial feedback I'll give you is try to shorten this a bit.
Sure, and this is pulled from the original.
Yep.
If it's not useful/needed, yeah, then we can definitely edit down.
But I do actually want to pause on this opening paragraph that talks about what the item looks like, because right away we have a potential game design gotcha. So if you take a look at the final sentence of this paragraph, it says, "The armor always stands upright even when not being worn." This immediately rings a rules design alarm bell for me, because many people will read this and think what this is actually meaning to say is you can't be knocked prone. And it might even make me wonder, is it even possible when I'm wearing this armor, is it even possible for me to lie down? And so when you're doing this kind of design, be very careful about writing story text that has unintended rules consequences. And this indeed has an unintended rules consequence, because a reasonable, and you're basically writing for the reasonable D&D player. The reasonable D&D player could read that and immediately think, oh, I can't be knocked prone. But then, again, you have all these other questions.
Right.
And one of the last things you want a rule to do is spark a bunch of questions, because a rule's job is to be as clear as possible. So then my question to you, I would then go to the writer, and hey, I have him right here.
Yes.
Is the intent that you can't be knocked prone?
No, the intent is not that you cannot be
Got it.
knocked prone.
So we need...
How many double negatives I have? So maybe it is.
Right.
I don't know how many I said.
So we will flag this sentence and say, okay, this needs to be redone or cut. Maybe the intent is when you're not wearing it, it stands up. But then you have to ask, is it even worth saying anything at all?
Right.
Because whenever you have one of these sort of things that starts like unspooling all these questions,
Yes.
it's like, okay, cut.
You don't want to be in a position where the dungeon master is frustrated by the player having this item and causing a debate.
Right. Now, there is nothing wrong with a suit of armor that makes it impossible for you to be knocked prone. That's a mighty ability.
Right.
But if that's the intent, we need to make sure that the item says that as clearly as possible. So let's jump into the next paragraph. While wearing this armor, I'm going to pause there, because this is, by the way, how rules development goes, where we might get only like half a sentence at a time. All right, so while wearing this armor, I want to pause here because I sometimes get asked by the community, why do we occasionally say things like this in an item that requires attunement? Because they might say, well, because the item requires attunement, doesn't it go without saying that you're wearing it?
Yes.
And the thing is no. Attunement, being attuned to something, is not the same as holding it, wielding it, wearing it, carrying it. We actually need this level of specificity because remember, your attunement can continue with something as long as it's nearby to you, or even, I mean, your attunement will continue even if it's very far away from you, as long as it's not very far away from you for more than 24 hours. And so we need to make it clear that it's only while you're wearing the armor, not like it's 2 miles back from you in your house and giving you the following benefits. No, you've got to be wearing it. So good job on having that clarity, because actually it's funny the number of times I get magic items to develop by somebody else and it's a wearable item, yet it nowhere tells you have to actually be wearing it to gain the benefits. So literally you could lock the item in your trunk, in your cottage, a few miles away, and for the next 24 hours gain those benefits. So
it's a very lich mechanic type of thing. Like, I'm going to hide my heart somewhere, and I'll be safe.
Yeah. All right. So good job on it. Yes, we've got to be wearing it. Now we jump into your strength increases by 1 to a maximum of 20, and you have dark vision to a range of 60 feet. All right. I know the dark vision is here because if you go back to the first paragraph, we know that there's this glass plate and whatnot that I'm assuming you're looking through in the helm.
Yes.
And it's probably that glass plate that is giving you dark vision. Now, one question that this does pose is, what if you already have dark vision? And what if your dark vision is better than this? Now, there is nothing wrong with this just doing this. Like, it doesn't, sometimes what we'll do is we'll have a feature increase the extent of your dark vision, or we don't have to do that, but we should clarify that this does not override dark vision that you might have that's better.
Okay.
But we could go either way with it.
And this is me reading the original version of the magic item. My sort of belief in that is once you're in this armor, you're beholden to the power armored senses. So you're seeing through its mechanical eyes, not your own.
Got it.
In my mind, that would read as you've got the armor's dark vision 60. If you've got dark vision 120, too bad. It's filtering through the armor's eyes.
Interesting.
But and again, that's kind of me making a supposition about the original version here.
Right. However, you could also imagine that looking through the plate in the helm of the armor is an enhancement, almost like corrective lenses like I wear.
Yes.
Where they'll give you a capability if you don't already have it, but if you have that capability, it's getting better.
My desire here would be ease of use rules-wise. So whatever is probably the most common language, I would defer to that readily.
So, and then here, your two best choices because of simplicity, clarity, and feel good for the player would be you gain dark vision out to 60 feet if you don't already have it. Your other option is you gain this, and if you do have dark vision already, then it gets extended by a certain amount. It just depends on how generous you want to be as a designer. And what you're seeing here, everyone, is there are parts of our work, even in the balance process and the development process, that is pure art. It is not about, is this broken or not? It really is, what's the story we're telling here? That's why I said we need to actually start thinking about what is the story of this glass plate?
Right.
Is it in fact limiting you in some way, or is it enhancing you?
Right.
Now, a player using this is going to want to be enhanced.
Yes.
And almost always, unless we have some compelling story reason to approach this otherwise, almost always we want something, especially like a magic item, to feel like an enhancement.
Yes.
I'm better because of this.
And there's trade-offs coming up down the road.
Yes.
So I would have the opening gambit here be enhancements by design.
All right, then let's do that. Let's have it. It gives you dark vision, and if you already have it, it gets better because of you looking through this plate. Now let's talk about this increase to your strength. Story-wise, not only just for powered armor in general, but also because of the original powered armor in the first edition version of the adventure, I like the idea, and I think a lot of players will like the idea of getting stronger.
Right.
Now we have some issues here. One is that increasing your strength by only 1, there's too good of a chance that that will do nothing for you. Because of how our ability modifiers work, basically this will only benefit you if your strength is currently an odd number.
Right, yes, yes.
And which means it could end up doing nothing for a lot of people. Or even if it did something, let's say, and I love to play physically weak spellcasters. I hop in here with my strength of 9. Woo, I have 10. So one thing we could look at, a simple fix would be it increases by 2. Still not going to, be spectacular, but at least we know everyone is going to see their strength modifier go up by 1.
Right.
But I think an even better route to go, because what I'm imagining, particularly given the story description of this armor, is that it has actually sort of like musculature built into it.
Right.
And here is actually where I would like us to see, I'd like to see us do something similar to what we did with like the gauntlets of Ogre Power and whatnot, where it brings your strength up to a particular level, but won't lower your strength if your strength is above that level. And so for those of you who don't know, we have items in the Dungeon Master's Guide and elsewhere in the game where it will say, while wearing this item, your strength becomes like 19, unless it's better than that.
Which does match a bit more of the original, which is, hey, your strength is 1800.
Right.
The armor has its own set of hydraulics or what have you.
Yep.
That's just the operating strength it operates at. So maybe that makes much better sense for this as well then.
The beauty of that approach also is then you don't have to worry about how this might combine with something else in the game that increases ability scores. So everyone watching, you'll probably notice that in the game, we increase your ability scores very rarely. I mean, you get to do it, of course, when you get your ability score increase. And then there are a few magic items that are of higher rarities that will increase your score. But otherwise, a lot of items, what they do is they'll bring you up to a point, but they don't give you a raw bonus. And we do that on purpose so that we do not end up with a bunch of things in the game that could combine together. And it's like, and now I have a 30 strength. Now, now, of course, all those items could build in that there's a max, which is what we do usually do when we give you any kind of increase. We say up to a maximum of 20, or in a few rare cases, the maximum is a bit higher than that. But I think here, we can just avoid all of that, particularly given the story of this armor, by just saying, while you wear it, your strength is 18 or 19, and you're good to go.
All right,
Or
so
because it's a legendary item, we get really crazy and we say your strength is 20. Just like bring it up to the mortal maximum. And we cap it there.
Okay.
Because here's the thing, keep in mind, that's going to be awesome. Awesome for certain characters, but then there will be other characters who will put this armor on, and having that strength will be kind of a
wash.
Yeah, because they won't use it for much, except for the cool story moment where having a strength that high is great because they were able to hold up the collapsing ceiling, wearing the powered armor while their friends escaped. Now you put this armor on a character who relies on their strength in combat, and that 20 strength could be super duper juicy. someone listening might think, Jeremy, aren't you worried about giving out a 20 strength? Here's the thing. It's a legendary item. And for now, we might decide to even make it the rarity even higher.
Or an artifact or something
Yes.
along those lines.
It also requires attunement, but here's the other secret. Most characters who rely on strength, when they are high enough level where a legendary item becomes a likely thing for them to acquire, their strength is likely close to 20 anyway. So what sounds like this oh my God, 20, well, it's like the character probably already has an 18 strength. So what we're actually talking about functionally is +2 to strength.
And keeping it appropriate to the character level.
Right.
Seems to be the other underlying goal and the design.
If we were targeting a lower rarity, then I would not be suggesting such a great increase. Now,
My suit of common powered armor is not going to make
no.
the cut?
Yeah, no. Okay, so now what I would do is when we would do our final pass, and we don't do that yet, because by the way, the development process usually takes several cycles through. Right now, I'm all like, woo, 20 strength. Now, once we finish developing the rest of the item,
Yes.
I might look back at that and say, woo, we were too generous. We need to bring that down. But hey, we're just at the top of the item.
Sure.
We also, part of balancing an item is also comparing it to items that exist. So we might, once we're done, after then looking at other items in the magic item, which everyone is always a crucial piece of game balance in D&D, is once you've designed the thing, then look at other things like it to make sure it's going to feel like a natural addition to sort of that ecosystem of things, whether that ecosystem is magic items, spells, feats, class features, what have you. And so we might find when we then do that cross-check, and everything we give out in the Dungeon Master's Guide goes no higher than 19. We might find that. In which case, then we have to ask ourselves the question: do we want this to be the item that breaks, that shatters that ceiling? And maybe the answer is yes. So let's move on. But for now, we're going to have this, rather than giving you a strength increase, we're gonna have it just set your strength based on design we've done in several other items in the Dungeon Master's Guide. All right, now we get to the next sentence. So again, everyone, we've made it 3 sentences. This is how development goes. Okay, the next one. You take 3 piercing damage each time the armor is donned or removed as it connects and disconnects from your body. By the way, in our rules, we refer to armor being donned or doffed.
Doffed.
So editorially, I would say we should say doffed instead of removed. But before you make that change, what I would actually do in development is cut the sentence. Here's why. The amount of damage for the level of character who is likely to be wearing this armor is so low that this kind of thing becomes an annoyance. And so what I would say is either we need to make it hurt more or just get rid of it.
So the story intent, hopefully clear, the armor integrating with you as a person. Well, there's a little cost for something actually doing that.
Right.
Point taken, is the damage negligible? Well, if it is not negligible, if it's meaningful, well, now the item has a negative, implication for wearing it. So which way do we want to go? Is it super desirable that you're willing to take that tax up front, or would we rather just move on?
So I would rather cut it, precisely because since I have read ahead, I know later in the item is going to give you opportunities to burn your own hit points to power it. So I think there we're capturing the story well enough that we don't need this damage tax up front. I also am very cautious about us including this type of mechanic in something, because since it's almost always going to occur outside combat, what this type of little damage cost is likely to do is turn into this annoying thing at the table where the person puts on the armor, they take that damage, then they're going to want someone to heal them, they're going to want to take a short rest, and everyone is going to hate this armor.
let's cut it. It's gone.
Good, good. And that, by the way, is a really important step, everyone, when you are developing something for D&D. And that is actually ponder the annoyance possibilities. Because since it's a co-op game, you not only want the person who gets the item to love it, you want the other people at the table, even if they don't love it, you don't want them to be annoyed by it.
Yes.
You don't want to be like every time Cindy's character puts on the powered armor, you don't want the table to all be like, oh no, here this thing comes.
There is that inherent challenge too,
Right.
which is it's not an annoyance, it's a great thing, but is
Right.
the table jealous because only the paladin can have the Holy Avenger,
Right.
and they have it. So
Right.
finding ways to mitigate that is a challenge for dungeon masters. I don't have an answer for that, but
Yeah.
all right. So moving on to
So let's get in now to really the heart of this item. And I just realized looking at the time.
yeah, we're at 250 already.
Yes, we are going to actually have to finish this item in our next episode, which will be next week.
Yes, let's do that. Let's promise that we're not done here.
So how about should we save the meat of the...
Because I think once we start that conversation, we're going to really get into that conversation.
Absolutely,
And we did promise some questions.
Yes. So let's answer some questions. Everyone, next week we will return to the powered armor, and we are going to dive into all of these different ways in which you can burn your own hit points to get various cool abilities like the ability to fly, for instance, resistance to damage and whatnot.
Oh, really quickly. Sorry, this question did come up. I might have answered it incorrectly. Will these Extra Life adventures make it to D&D Beyond, like the Total Package? That I don't know. I read that as the DM's Guild. That's definitely the intent. D&D Beyond, not sure about that. Question, will Dungeon of the Mad Mage and Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica include new monsters?
Yes. Both books have new monsters. Dungeon of the Mad Mage, not too many, but holy smokes does Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica have a lot of new monsters in it. So that book not only has a bestiary giving stats to various creatures from the world of Ravnica, but it also has a whole section giving stats to various NPCs in the world of Ravnica. So I think people, even if they decide not to play in Ravnica, are going to enjoy looting the book for these various stat blocks.
I will say there's one monster in Dungeon of the Mad Mage that's stuck out to me because I have a player in my home campaign plays as that monster, and it's been Sean Wood I won't name it.
Oh,
Sean
God.
Wood did the illustration.
Yes.
It's been a thorn in my side.
So, yeah, I don't want to spoil it yet, but there is a classic monster, and here I use the word classic very, very, very loosely. There is a classic monster from the Fiend Folio that makes its glorious return to D&D.
You know of which
in Dungeon of the Mad Mage.
Let's see. Will we ever see a Flump as a playable race? Or let me ask that more broadly. Would a creature like a Flump, could that ever be depicted as a playable race in a realistic way?
It's certainly possible. I mean, quite honestly, we could come up with playable versions of many, many, many things in the game.
Turtle.
Yeah. Now, we have typically only done it with creatures that are at least partially humanoid in their anatomy. Probably the example of us getting furthest away from humanoid anatomy is the centaur. And for those of you who don't know, the centaur is in Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica as a playable race, as is the minotaur. And several others. The Vidalcan is another one. Our favorite elephant people.
The
The Loxodons.
Loxodons, yes.
And I love them, just like I love turtles. But
anthropomorphic animals are fun to play.
Yes,
They're just fun.
So Flumps would introduce some fun design challenges because their anatomy is so non-humanoid.
Yes.
But again, it's not impossible. You would just have to design around and with the particularities of their bodies as you realize them as something playable.
I had that as one of my Extra Life donation rewards to pick my companion, and somebody did pick a Flump as my companion. So not a playable race, but I have to have one accompany me through this adventure. I also have to wear a mustache or grow a mustache.
You Bart.
I cannot grow a mustache. It was for, hey, donate for Extra Life, and I will match that donation also for Movember.
Oh, got it.
And where I cannot cultivate a mustache. Pelham Green, on the other hand, who's zooming in on my
on your whiskers,
my whiskery features, my patchy whiskery features, could probably grow a full Old West style mustache within 24 hours. We've got a bunch of questions coming in.
Yeah, let's hit a few more.
Will the Centaur Minotaur character races be included in a standard D&D non-magic product?
So, Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica is a D&D product.
Probably merits explaining.
Yeah. That book does not require any knowledge of how Magic the Gathering works. That book is written entirely as a Dungeons and Dragons book. I think D&D fans are going to be very pleased that when you open it up and read it, it's like, oh, it's a D&D book. It just happens to be set in one of Magic's many wonderful worlds. So for us, that book is a standard D&D book.
And would I be correct in saying, if you're familiar with our Plane Shift articles that we've done in the past,
Yes.
a similar vein, clearly Magic, but absolute D&D mechanics.
But I would say even more so than the Plane Shift articles, Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica is again thoroughly an official D&D product. We made sure when going through it that nothing in the book required you to know anything about Magic to use this book.
Right.
And let's say you get this book, you're going to get, it's a 256-page book. The monster chapter alone is almost a third of the book. And so that is a bunch of stat blocks you as a DM have at your disposal no matter what world you're DMing in.
Yeah.
The book's magic item chapter, usable again, no matter what setting you're using. The subclasses in the book, usable, because the book has 2 subclasses in it, usable in any D&D setting. The Playable Races, usable in any D&D setting. This is, from top to bottom, a Dungeons and Dragons book.
It is a meaty book, too. So, yeah, we'll be excited to showcase some of those as well. This is a question that kind of goes back to the powered armor. And this, I suppose a question about Magic item design in general. It is a Magic suit of armor. Restricted by size categories in any way? Is that something that's a consideration when making it a Magic item? Or is the general design intent, no, this should be usable by whoever comes upon the item?
So unless an item says otherwise, it follows the general rules for a Magic item. And the guidance for wearable items is that they can resize unless the DM says otherwise.
Yes.
So really, in a way, we punt on that to the DM so that you don't end up with a bunch of feel-bad circumstances where, the DM might place the powered armor into an adventure or even more likely, a writer puts it in and says, all right, this fits only medium-sized creatures.
But we have an all-gnome party.
Exactly. And now suddenly, it's like, no one can wear this item. No real fun gain has been acquired by that.
In much the same way magic, it resizes science. It's a high-tech suit of armor. I could definitely see story-wise, it would just reconfigure itself to fit a size character.
Now,
even a centaur.
I like the question because it really gets to the heart of this item, sort of the foundation that this item is built on. If this item was presented not as a magic item, but fully a piece of science, then it would need to answer all of those questions. But because it's presented as a magic item, it can rely on our general magic item rules, and it doesn't have to answer any of those questions. So that's a key consideration. Let's say you came back to me before next week's episode, and you told me, I don't want it to be a magic item, I want it to just be science. Then we're going to have to put all sorts of extra design in here, because then we can't rely on any of the general rules for a magic item. And if you out there are already doing D&D design, or you're aspiring to be a D&D designer, one of the advantages of building in one of the areas of the game that already exists is you can build on the foundation of those general rules. And so you don't have to keep reinventing the wheel. You don't have to keep posing to yourself all of the design questions that we have to pose to ourselves whenever we forge into fresh territory. So again, our magic item rules answer questions like, can people of different sizes wear these things? But as soon as you step out of the boundaries of the magic item rules, those questions all have to be answered again. That said, if you came to me and said, it's just science, we could do
it's
that.
Just good science, Jeremy. It's powered armor.
But I love it being within the realm of magic.
I do as well.
Partly because then also we can rely on our attunement rules. Also, this seems very magical to me, that even though it might have the look of science, it's really in many ways powered by magic. And D&D, going all the way back to Expedition to the Berry Peaks, has often had this kind of magic tech fusion. Eberron is filled with it, where the thing, the lightning rail, it looks like a piece of technology, but it is powered by magic.
Well, I'm just glad that you didn't crumple it up and make me eat it. So, so this is a win all around right now. Yeah. But here we are at 3 o'clock. So we are going to cut over to Greg Tito and the D&D News. And of course, Dice Camera Action at 4 p.m. Pacific after that, followed by Sirens of the Realms will be returning this evening at 7 p.m. tonight. So Jeremy, thank you so much for taking the time to dive into the powered armor. Again, this is for an adventure we're working on for the DMs Guild. We're going to make it part of Extra Life. So hopefully hopefully something that sparks your interest. All the proceeds go to a great cause. So thank you for helping make it better.
It's great to be back, and I look forward to us tinkering with this armor some more next week.
So next week we'll be back with Jeremy. We'll dive into it a little further. We still have some more mechanics to look at. We'll answer more of your questions, so send them in. We'll look through the chat as always, and we'll be back next week. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.